Now we haven't done a Name the Fly contest in about 6 weeks, so I figure we're about due. Hello everybody, welcome to Savage Flies. I'm Matt, thanks for stopping by. So when I sat down to the bench today to figure out what I wanted to tie for the channel, I realized we haven't done anything from craft store materials in a while, so I pulled out one of my old fly boxes and just started rooting around looking for a pattern that I could tie with all craft store materials, and I found one, and it was a pretty nifty pattern. I haven't tied it in quite a while, and I can't remember the last time I fished it. It's probably been a year or two, but I saw it and said, I can definitely make this out of just craft store materials. Really just 2 materials. It's got a glass bead. Now this thing, this 1.5 pound tub of glass beads, I've probably had this for 5 years. This is a pretty good buy from a craft store. I've tied with it fairly regularly. It doesn't even look like I've made a dent in it. And then the other material, just some of this wool, some of the roving rolls from the craft store wool. So just 2 materials, very simple pattern to tie. Now, I can't speak for how great a fly it is. I do remember one time I was just out on a picnic with my family, had a little 2-weight in the back of my truck, and this was one of the flies I had. A bunch of sunfish in a small little pond. I toss it out there in maybe a 6-foot diameter spot where there were 20 little sunfish. And as soon as it hit the water, 4 or 5 of them just attacked it. So I'd yank one of those fish out of there, throw it back in the same spot, and then catch his friend. And, fish after fish were attacking this. And none of them were big. They were all, this big right here. But I'll bet you I caught some of those same fish twice. So does this make this particular pattern really successful? I'd say no, because I think anything I threw at those fish that day, they would have probably eaten it. But it is a kind of cool looking pattern. I'm certain it's going to work on tailwater trout around here. It just looks kind of like a midge pupa. Now again, I've never named this fly. I haven't really fished it all that often. So let's do a Name the Fly contest. If you remember the last one, all you have to do is just leave a comment with whatever you think we should call this pattern. I'll collect comments for a couple of days, then run them all by my kids, my crazy young kids, and say, hey, pick out the coolest name for this fly, and somebody will be a winner. And just to make it exciting and more interesting, I'll send you a $25 gift card to Stockard. I know it's not a lot, but hey, it does make it a little more fun to participate. So that's it. Pretty fun pattern. Hope you like it. Let's give it a shot. So there you go. In the vise, my no-name, unknown, midge pupa, big ugly fly. So I'm tying this on a size 12. It's a curve shank hook. Tie it on whatever hook you want. I think the curve shank looks kind of cool for this one though. And for the bead, also anything you want. This is actually a green bead. It's hard to tell with the green background, but I think the bead just gives it that small little hint of an air bubble. And I'm definitely putting some weight on this, if for nothing else, to hold that bead in. This one is an 020, so a good 6 or 7 wraps. All right, and then the thread, I'm gonna use a black, but if you wanna get even crazier, throw an orange or red or yellow, just do whatever you want. It's a crazy fly. It's a crazy big ugly fly. So we'll go ahead and catch this in. I do wanna create a little ramp right here. Because we've got a cool looking underbody that we wanna wrap fairly tight. And I have one, I'm gonna have to go ahead and cut this tag off because I want my rib. You don't need to do a rib necessarily, but I think it's kind of cool too. I want to create, like you would a dubbing loop right here. And so I've got 2 strands of thread coming off the back. That's gonna be my rib. So I'll park this, find my magnet, just park this right over here to the back. And put some wax on. So my good old craft store roving rolls of wool. If I showed you this in the intro, if not, it's this thing right here. And just grab some of it. It's pretty long fiber stuff, but I'm gonna put it on pretty thin. Just grab a small little piece like that and then start making your noodle. Make it thinner at the top, and then you can get a little bit thicker toward the middle of the noodle that it will be, wrapped on up toward the front of the fly. So I'll put a couple of inches on, and that'll get me about halfway, and then I'll need to put a little bit more to get the rest of the way up. Okay, I think that's far enough up. Now let's just wrap this rib. Counter wrap it if you want, or it doesn't really matter. It's gonna give us just a little bit more durability. It's not so much for segmentation, but it will give you a little bit of that as well. So go ahead and take it 4 or 5 turns up, fairly tight, till you get up to the bead. Okay, so you really can't see that as a rib, maybe just a little bit, but if you had a bright red or gold, you might see it a little bit more. But what's the coolest thing about this fly is this next part. So that same wool we used, I just take a fair sized clump of it like this right here and kind of spin it together, twist it into like almost a piece of yarn, and I'm going to catch it in right behind the bead on top, and then I'm going to fold it back and use a good bit of it. You can always trim it out later if you want. So let's go ahead and break our thread, and then after you break your thread, go ahead and put a few more wraps in here to just catch it back in. I suppose I could have edited that out, but why not? Just show you that everybody breaks their thread from time to time. If you don't break it every now and then, you're probably not tying hard enough. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and just fill that gap in a little bit right there. And how's that look? Sticking up a little bit like a Don King haircut. We don't necessarily want that. We want it kind of laying flat. So I'm gonna take a few more wraps right there. There we go. Now that's flat. So what I'll do here, just pull it kind of tight, a little bit past the bend of the hook, and snip it off. Now the fun part, take a toothbrush or whatever and just brush the heck out of it. And you're going to pull a lot of loose fibers out, and that's fine, that's okay. Just do that mess right there, and then grab it and kind of tight, and I'm pulling out anything that's, you know, not caught in, that's kind of loose. And just keep doing that until you get a really fuzzy looking poly roseboro kind of nymph. And that's it. That's kind of our body. But we got that ugly mess right behind the bead and that, so I'm gonna just throw a little bit more dubbing on and clean that up. Of course, if you were using a bright orange or red thread, you could just wrap that with thread and call that a hot spot. But I don't want to do that. I'm just gonna fill it in with some dubbing right here. Won't take much, maybe 2 inches of a pretty thin noodle to cover that up. Okay, I think that's fine. We're ready for a whip finish. Put a drop of super glue on your thread if you want, or just do 2 whip finishes, or just do it 1 and call it good enough. So let's get in here and then just saw that thread off. And that's it. Big ugly, whatever we want to call this fly, we'll figure it out. But, you know, I've had a little bit of luck with this thing. Very simple pattern. After you've done one, you can knock a couple of them out, or knock them out in like 3 minutes each. So that's it, my friends. I appreciate you watching. Y'all take care, and we'll see you next time.